Airports are supposed to smell like possibility, burnt espresso, floor polish, and the electric hum of departures. That morning, the drop-off lane smelled like betrayal. My mother didn't even lower her voice. She smiled, smoothed the silk scarf at her neck, and said the sentence that split my life in two, before and after. Avery, instead of you, Haley will be going on the Hawaii trip you planned. Oh, for one quiet, cinematic second, even the rolling suitcases seemed to freeze. What is going on? I heard my own voice from a few steps away, like I'd left my body and was watching a stranger plead for basic sense. I had spent 2 years constructing this, the itinerary, the hotel, the restaurants, the private tours, the little surprises that would make my parents feel seen for once. I'd paid for everything except the flights, the one piece they insisted on handling. Our gift, my mother had said. Apparently, our gift meant handing my trip to my sister, Haley, 26, and chronically finding herself. Stood beside my parents in a lemon-yellow sundress, like a sponsored ad for unearned ease. No rent, no job she could stick to. A skill set that expired every 3 months. Art, then yoga, then cafe management, then content. Somehow, she was always sensitive. Somehow, I was always fine. Growing up, the pattern never missed its cue. When I got an A, my father's favourite line was, "That's a given. You're responsible." When Haley scraped by with average, the confetti cannons went off. "Look at you. You worked so hard. I made student council president. Haley placed in a school art contest. Guess who got the cake? In college, I earned the full scholarship that erased my tuition. Haley's ordinary was rebranded as unique. Adulthood didn't change the script. My consulting firm's steady growth was labelled obsessive, while her quitting was called authentic. Now, the Hawaii dream I'd built for them, was being airdropped into Haley's hands like a party favour. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "This trip is something I planned for years. I paid for it." My mother waved away the words like cigarette smoke. "We're grateful. Avery, truly. But you're always working. Haley's been under so much stress, this will be healing for her. I knew you would understand." Stress? As in, her follower count plateauing. A sold-out handbag. A Pilates instructor who didn't vibe. Haley pressed a palm to her chest. Chin tilted, like magnanimous royalty. "Thank you for understanding." She cooed, careful to keep her tone humble, and her smile triumphant. I could never do this by myself. Andeville, my father hovered on the edge of the moment, gaze fixed, somewhere over my shoulder. The way cowards worship, the middle distance. Guilt softened his mouth, but never found his spine. He'd already decided his role, spectator to his wife's decisions, apologist to his favoured child, mediator. When it cost him nothing, I swallowed the roar climbing my throat. "Fine," I said, my voice suddenly calm, in a way that scared me. "Have a wonderful trip. Take care." 3 pairs of eyebrows jumped. Apparently I was scripted to beg. Haley's smile brightened, as if my consent were an accessory she'd needed to complete the look. "You really understand me. Thank you." "Avery." Something shattered so cleanly inside me that the break almost sounded like a blessing. I watched them wheel away towards sliding glass doors and soft jazz. Haley waved like a homecoming queen. My father glanced back once, then flared. My mother kept her smile pinned on, but I caught it, the tiny flicker of unease. For the first time in 30 years, she sensed I might not be the predictable, long-suffering daughter who absorbed every blow and paid every bill. I drove home on autopilot, the steering wheel warm under my palms, while my mind laid out a map with surgical precision. Depart 10 a.m. Honolulu arriva l'11:00. 0 a.m. Local time. Hotel check-in after 3 p.m. That gave me a window wide enough to turn their stolen luxury into a scavenger hunt for mediocrity. Laptop open. Spine straight. I pulled up the itinerary I'd named honeymoon, but make it 30 years late. Because my parents had once told me whisper, soft, almost embarrassed, that their single overseas trip had been their Hawaii honeymoon. Money had been tight then. Life got tighter. Travel became a story they told about other people's lives. This was supposed to be my answer to that. The hotel alone had taken months of orchestration. An oceanfront suite at the Halekulani, the exact place my mother read about in a youthful novel, and my father circled in an old surfing magazine with a sigh. Someday. I'd made someday happen. I'd arranged the welcome amenity, champagne and fruit, on arrival, and the finale, a professional photographer, to capture their last night, against a bruised Waikiki sunset. I'd secured the impossible. La Mer sunset, seating twice. Breakfast at Orchids every morning. 4 of Honolulu's most coveted dinner tables. I'd booked the helicopter over Diamond Head. A private Big Island stargazing tour, because my mother loves the sky. Turtles and turquoise on a private snorkel charter. And a spa day that would starch the years of labour out of their shoulders. 2 clicks later, I was staring at the hotel's cancellation policy. Penalties. Percentages. Fine print like barbed wire. I noted the costs, measured the hit, and felt nothing but clarity. If they wanted to escort Hayley into my generosity, they could do it without my money. I hovered over the button, cancel reservation, Halekulani, oceanfront suite. The confirmation prompt bloomed. Are you sure you want to cancel? I didn't blink. Yes. Cancellation completed. Acquired. Delicious satisfaction, uncoiled in my chest. It wasn't the wild joy of vengeance. It was the cool relief of putting a bone back where it belongs. That suite had taken 2 years of phone calls, waitlists, calendar math, and patience. With one decision, I reclaimed my time and my dignity. 1. I murmured to no one. Next. La Mer. Cancelled. Orchids. Breakfasts. Cancelled. The helicopter Hayley had bragged about in her group chat. Cancelled. Snorkel charter. Cancelled. Mauna Kea stars. Cancelled. Spa day. Photographer. Welcome amenity. Cancelled. With each confirmation email, I felt the scale recalibrate. Every shiny expectation they'd packed in their carry-ons would collapse. One awkward conversation at a time. 2 hours later, my inbox looked like snowfall. Cancellation confirmed, stacked into a clean column of closure. If they wanted to take Hayley instead of me, fine. But they would walk into Hawaii, with the same careless entitlement they'd always had, and find that the ocean does not respect thieves. I opened a new tab and typed like a woman, walking into her own future, Marina Bay Sands suite. Solo. The results loaded in impeccable symmetry glass. Sky. Water meeting. Like an invitation. I smiled and clicked. Back at the airport hours earlier. My mother had said, I thought you would understand. She was right. I understood more than she could imagine. The first voicemail came as I was pouring coffee the next morning. My mother's voice, strained, but still clinging to politeness, bled through the speaker. Avery. What happened? The hotel says they have no reservation. Call me back immediately. I pictured it so clearly. I almost laughed. The 3 of them rolling up to the Halekulani in a taxi. Hayley's sunglasses perched like entitlement across her face. My parents brimming with smug relief at how easily their replacement plan had worked. Then front desk. Polite apology. I'm sorry. but there is no reservation under that name. And the second voicemail arrived minutes later. Haley's voice. Shrill and incredulous. Avery. What is going on? We're stranded. Fix this. I can't believe you'd let something like this happen. Stranded. The word came from the same girl who had taken my gift like a trophy. Smiling at me, as if I should be grateful. She accepted it. My father's message arrived next. And as always, it was coated in confusion. Not conviction. Avery. It seems there's been some mistake. Could you call the hotel? They said something about cancellation. Maybe you can fix this. And maybe I could fix it. That was the line my family had depended on my entire life, that I would swoop in. Glue together the chaos. Clean up after their choices. But this time, the glue was locked away. And the pieces were theirs to trip over. As the morning ticked forward, the messages stacked like dominoes. First, panic. Then, pleading. By noon, the voicemails dripped with full-blown hysteria. La Mère won't let us in. They said the reservation was cancelled, my mother snapped. Her voice rising to the octave of accusation. The helicopter tour's gone too. Haley screamed. Disbelief. Thick, as if the laws of consequence had never applied to her until this second. This isn't just a trip anymore. My father muttered in one of his later messages. It's ordinary. Ordinary. That was the word that cut deepest. Because, yes, that was exactly the point. I had designed their dream with obsessive precision. Without it, they were just 3 tourists with carry-ons, and a sinking feeling, left to scavenge the scraps of Waikiki motels and chain restaurants. I let the phone buzz itself hoarse, while I sat in my apartment, fork deep in a stack of buttery pancakes, enjoying the luxury of silence. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. It sometimes comes dressed as brunch. Sweet syrup dripping over golden edges. Eaten, while your enemies are begging, in another time zone. By midday, I opened my laptop again. Not to undo anything, but to reward myself. The Helekulani suite I'd cancelled had returned a healthy refund. Along with the Michelin reservations and tours, I skimmed the totals, mentally tallying what portion could now be redirected. The tab already open read, Marina Bay Sands 5 nights. Sky Suite. It was indulgent. Yes, but it was also symbolic. For the first time, I was building an itinerary where I was the center, not the afterthought. A rooftop infinity pool breakfast, gardens by the bay, spa treatments that weren't gifts for others, but medicine for myself. Every click felt like a vow. This time, I choose me. That evening, I drafted my social media post. The words were clinical, not vindictive. Planned a Hawaii trip for my parents for 2 years. At the airport, I was told my unemployed sister Haley would be going instead on my reservations. With my money, so I cancelled everything and chose to spend the time in Singapore instead. Sometimes, the best companion is yourself. I attached photos that hadn't even happened yet, stock previews of Marina Bay Sands, gleaming dishes I knew I'd soon taste, the infinity pool shimmering like an altar. Then I set the location tag to Singapore and scheduled it for the morning my plane would land. Because revenge isn't just about what you take away, it's about what you replace it with. By the 3rd day of their dream trip, I boarded my flight. Business class. Glass of champagne sweating against my palm. My phone vibrated with another storm of missed calls. I scrolled lazily through the messages in the lounge. Before boarding, Haley, you've ruined everything. Do you even realize this was my first overseas trip? You're selfish. Mother, because of you, we're stuck in a cheap motel, eating fast food, betraying your family for luxury alone. Shame on you. Father, Avery, Please, let's talk when you return. This has gone too far. But the one that made me smirk was Haley's final attempt. I wanted to stay at Marina Bay Sands, too. You're the worst, sister. Oh, no. I thought I wasn't the worst sister. I was the only one who had ever truly acted like family, until I decided to stop. As the plane lifted into the sky, I felt 30 years of weight slip from my shoulders. The anger was still there, but now it pulsed with something cleaner: liberation. This wasn't just about punishing them. It was about finally claiming the truth I had ignored my entire life, that my existence was worth prioritizing. When the cityscape of Singapore glimmered beneath me hours later, I realized I wasn't escaping my family. I was discovering myself. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into my suite at Marina Bay Sands was the view. Singapore glittered beneath me like a jewel box spilled across black velvet. Each skyscraper, a candle. Each bridge, a necklace clasped in gold. It was breathtaking, and it was mine. For once. Mine alone. I dropped my bag on the king bed, slid open the curtains, and laughed softly. My family, halfway across the Pacific, was probably arguing with motel staff about threadbare towels. Meanwhile, I stood in a room, scented with orchids, staring out at the infinity pool I had only ever seen in travel magazines. The irony was exquisite. The next morning, I swam at sunrise, the water warm as silk. As I floated, the skyline caught fire with light. Around me, couples posed for Instagram, but I wasn't envious. For the first time, solitude didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like luxury. Breakfast was a simple affair. Croissant, tropical fruit, coffee so smooth. It tasted like velvet. But eating it alone, unhurried, without needing to share a bite or feign conversation, was a revelation. Every flavor was sharper, every detail richer. I realized how much of my life had been lived in service to others, measuring my worth through their satisfaction. By afternoon, I wandered through gardens by the bay, where metal trees taller than cathedrals reached into the clouds. Families clustered together. Friends snapped photos. Lovers linked hands. I walked alone, and I smiled, because the silence around me was no longer emptiness. It was space. My space. That evening, I dressed for my dinner reservation at Odette, a Michelin-starred sanctuary of taste. Each course arrived like a painting: foamed textures, edible blossoms, seafood, so delicate, it melted on the tongue. And instead of being distracted by my mother's nitpicking or Haley's fake humility, I gave each dish my full attention. I savored it. Every bite said the same thing: you are worth this. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed on the tablecloth. Il est after dessert? Curiosity won. I checked the messages. From my mother: Avery, this is a disaster. The tours are cancelled. The restaurants say no reservation. You humiliated us. Everyone is asking what happened. Oh, from Haley. I can't believe you would do this to me. My friends were expecting photos. Now I look like a fool. I hate you. M. From my father, still clinging to his neutrality. Please. Avery. Let's resolve this as a family. It doesn't have to be like this. I set the phone down, the messages glowing like dying embers. Then I raised my glass of wine to my reflection in the window. Cheers, I whispered. Because this peace, this indulgence was what I had always deserved. On the second day, I booked a treatment at the Banyan Tree Spa. As the masseuse's hands untied years of tension in my shoulders, I thought of my mother's last voicemail, screeching about cheap motels and fast food meals. The harder she tried to paint me as a villain, the more she revealed herself. Later, I walked the Sentosa boardwalk, ate chili crab with my fingers, and laughed. As children shrieked on roller coasters, in the distance, I was living a new kind of truth, that joy doesn't need witnesses. That night, I posted my first photos. Infinity pool, sunrise, garden lights shimmering, a cocktail, glowing neon against the skyline. Caption: 2 years planning a Hawaii trip. At the airport, my parents told me, "Your sister will go instead." So I cancelled everything and booked Singapore. Sometimes the best company is yourself. Number self-love. Number family reality. The effect was immediate. Comments poured in. Cousins. Old classmates. Colleagues. Words of sympathy. Shock. And support. "I can't believe they did that to you. You deserve better. Avery. Haley should be ashamed." Oh. By contrast, my mother's carefully spun sob story collapsed. She had been calling relatives, neighbors, anyone who would listen, framing me as a reckless daughter who abandoned them. But with my posts, the truth stood naked. One aunt wrote publicly, "Your mother called me crying, saying you ruined their trip. But seeing this, I know who the real victim is." Even Haley's friends piled on. "Wait, you stole your sister's trip, and you're still in Hawaii?" The tide turned. In the court of family opinion, my mother and sister were not martyrs, they were thieves, and the world was watching. By the third evening, I sat at the Marina Bay Infinity Pool Bar, Singapore, sling in hand, scrolling through the avalanche of comments. My family's outrage had transformed into pure desperation. "Haley, you're ruining my reputation. People are attacking me online. Delete your posts now. Mother, how could you humiliate us like this?" Neighbors are whispering. Friends won't look me in the eye. Father, Avery, I beg you. Let's end this war. We are still family. Oh, but for once, I didn't feel guilt. Instead, I felt clarity. My whole life had been a performance where my role was supporting actress, applauded only when I sacrificed myself for someone else's spotlight. Now, I had rewritten the script, and as I watched the laser show dance across the bay, I knew I wasn't just getting revenge. I was reclaiming the one thing my family had stolen from me again and again, my right to choose myself. The longer I stayed in Singapore, the lighter I became. Each day was a ritual of freedom. Rooftop swims, solitary feasts, strolls through the super tree grove where neon vines glowed like alien veins. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't calculating anyone else's needs. I wasn't anticipating my mother's critiques, Haley's entitlement, or my father's half-hearted attempts at peace. I was simply living for me. On my fourth night, I sat on the balcony of my suite, pen in hand, journaling, while the city hummed below. My phone buzzed with another voicemail, and curiosity made me play it. This time, it was my grandmother's voice, stern, unflinching. "What you did, Elizabeth, my mother's name, is unforgivable. Avery planned this for you. How could you betray her? You and Haley ought to be ashamed. Apologize immediately." I could imagine the scene in their dingy motel room. My mother's face blanching, Haley's jaw dropping, my father pacing silently. For once, I wasn't the one being scolded. The tables had turned. By the time I flew home 5 days later, Singapore had carved new rules into my bones. My money is for me. Guilt is not currency. Self-respect comes first. I unpacked in silence, placed souvenirs on my desk, not as gifts for others, but as trophies for myself. The weeks that followed confirmed what I'd already known. The truth, once spoken, cannot be undone. My mother's reputation collapsed among relatives and neighbors. She was no longer the pitiful mother with a hard-working daughter. She was branded selfish, manipulative, alier. Her co-workers whispered, Invitation dried up. Hailey fared worse. Friends cut her off, disgusted by the viral story of the sister who stole what wasn't hers. At job interviews, the whispers followed her. Isn't she the girl who hijacked her sister's Hawaii trip? She stopped leaving the house. She scrolled endlessly through my Singapore photos, sending me bursts of envy, disguised as rage. I wanted Marina Bay Sands too. You're cruel. You ruined my first trip abroad. I didn't reply. Silence became my sharpest weapon. My father, once the bystander, tried to play peacemaker again. One afternoon, a call slipped through my office line. His voice was weary, years older than when I'd last heard it. Avery, I was wrong. We all were. I trampled on your kindness. Prioritized Hailey at every turn. Please, forgive us. I almost laughed. Forgiveness. After decades of being told my achievements were expected, while Hailey's mediocrity was special. After being robbed at the airport of the one gift I had poured myself into for years. Dad, I said calmly, I don't want to be involved in family problems anymore. If Hailey works and repays every cent of the travel cost, then maybe I'll consider speaking again. Until then, I'm done. And there was a pause. Then, almost broken, Avery, are you no longer family? I smiled bitterly. Family is supposed to mean mutual respect and support. Tell me, have you ever given me either? Or was I just your problem solver? Your wallet? Your stand-in parent for Hailey? You don't miss me. You miss my usefulness. Oh, he had no answer. That night, I sat with my journal again and wrote what felt like an epitaph for the old version of me. On the day of betrayal at the airport, I thought I lost everything. But in truth, I was given a gift. The chance to stop living as my family's shadow and start living as myself. In the months that followed, I transformed. With no family draining my time or money, my consulting firm grew rapidly. I built networks in Asia, inspired by my solo trip, and launched partnerships that doubled my revenue. I traveled more, not to please anyone else, but to feed my own curiosity. Paris in spring, Kyoto in autumn, always solo, always on my terms. I invested in a new apartment with wide windows and filled it only with things I loved. A leather armchair, a stack of first editions, a framed photo of Singapore's skyline. No family portraits, no relics of guilt. And then, one evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my father or mother. It was a notification Hailey's latest social media post. Shared by mutual friends. A filtered selfie. Captioned, learning to start over. Sometimes life knocks you down, but you rise again. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but then I remembered her smug smile at the airport. Her triumphant, thank you for understanding. And the pity dissolved. Some lessons you have to learn the hard way. Months later, I was sipping tea on my balcony when the thought hit me with clarity. I don't owe them anything. Not explanations. Not forgiveness. Not love given where none was returned. My parents and sister were still in the past, orbiting each other in the ruins of their choices. And me? I had finally stepped into my own present. My own future. The last words I'd spoken to them echoed back with new weight. I have decided to exclude you from my life. This is my new life. Goodbye. And for the first time, goodbye didn't hurt. It felt like freedom.